How did you come to this work?
Well, I come from those communities that we're so often seeking to impact. I come from a poor Black community that was primarily led by women. There were no universities where I grew up. I had to move away and, get an education. I grew up in Northern California in a place called Oroville. There was an important act of separation to leave them and that community to come get the education that I needed. And ultimately, working in finance doesn't mean that I work with a lot of people like me. But the separation from my community isn't a complete one. I actually bring my family values, my history with me as I really look at the communities that we want to impact. I can look at that from the inside out.
Wow. I'm so curious to learn more about your background, your history, because I would say there's an element of you as a Black woman really making a claim around how we need to rethink and shift our financial systems through social justice investing, right? A lens that you coined. How do we sit with separation, but also relationship?
I think this is something we really grapple with in philanthropy. So many of the people who want to have an impact are our program officers, and we don't see them show up as often on our investment committees. And it's the folks who may not be as interested in relationship may show up on the finance committee because that's what finance has become about. But that's not really where we need our hearts. We need our hearts where the power is, right? And the power is where most of those assets are. And guess who's in charge of that, right?
Well, rarely us.
Yeah.
Rarely us. But here we are.
So, Nwamaka, I'm really interested in how you came to this work and the systems that you're interested in being a part of transforming as a result of your kind of history.
I think so much of my life's journey has been around searching for justice, searching for dignity and respect. So being the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, my parents came to the States in 1979. They were impacted by racism in the education system, racism in the immigration system. So I lift that up because as someone who's always been searching for justice, I think as a young organizer, I recognized that in the search for justice, the way that I was trained was to organize communities to come out and push back against what was hurting and harming Black and Brown communities. And we had some victories, but what was challenging was that it can be hard to only tell people to come out and push back against what's hurting and harming you, and never have a moment to ask them, what do you want? What is your vision for your life? How do you actually want to live? I found myself here really trying to figure out how to support communities in having access to the resources that they needed to do this work. So I ended up creating a framework. It's called restorative economics. And so the framework looks at supporting community-owned and community-governed projects. So I'm interested in figuring out how do we support communities in moving out of extractive capitalist systems and into economic models that are rooted in shared prosperity. And then how do we ensure that those that are most impacted by the projects are also the ones that get to make the decisions about the projects? So looking at new systems of ownership, new systems of governance, and that it's rooted in a power building strategy. Ensuring that communities have access to the resources to contest for power and to win. And so my organizing work, my curiosity, my desire for justice and freedom to be treated with respect and dignity is what led me to now being in a position where my framework, restorative economics, is a huge part of the work that we do at the Katali Foundation.
So I both want to share an experience that I had and also ask you a question. And the question is about conflict of interest, right? Because the minute you have practitioners deciding where the money goes, or if you're a company like Adesina and you're an investee and a grantee of Tara Health Foundation, and you're also on the board, those kinds of issues come up. I mean, we really want to align with the law, of course, and ensure that we're not self-dealing. All of those types of things are important. And at the same time, it gets messy when you have the people who know and have direct experience kind of overlapping with those who are making the decisions. So I've had some really sweet experiences of healing at Tara. We were so interested in funding the ecosystem of impact investors and really looking into what do BIPOC, what do women and gender expansive asset managers need? And I had a lot of that information, and it became very clear that a lot of what was needed was non-extractive capital, like low interest loans that were tied to impact outcomes. And not always having to be like an equity stake, because we really wanted to preserve the equity for the community of workers, right, who made Adesina possible. And I remember we got to this point where suddenly we were going to set up this way of moving capital, but because I was on the board and I had given all this information, Adesina was excluded, right, from that possibility. And I was able to be really open with the board and say, you know, if I was already wealthy and the company was already really profitable, it wouldn't matter. But we're trying to have this big impact on the world at Tara. And, you know, I'm here offering the information, but somehow it doesn't feel right that we're excluded. So can we really take a deep look at like what really would be a conflict of interest and what would be a way to like really preserve the integrity and dignity of what Tara is doing, and at the same time not exclude Adesina because I was part of informing what's needed, right, for the very community that we are. And it was, I remember because I was recused from many of the conversations and decisions after that. But when Tara decided to lend to Adesina, I got really emotional, and I was talking to the treasurer of the board, and I was like, I'm really emotional. I don't think I understood that I would be emotional, like something's shifting. I didn't think something like this could happen. But, and she said, you know, healing can really touch us, and healing can hurt a little bit sometimes because healing happens over a wound. And there were many times I had contributed to the field or contributed to an effort, but because of this whole conflict of interest kind of like hard wall, I was excluded from any benefit. And we had found a way kind of legally to work through that to maintain integrity and also have Adesina participate. So I experienced that healing very directly. And I'm wondering if you've had that at Katali.
Yeah, I want to definitely respond to your conflict of interest question. And really quickly, when Tara Health made the decision to invest in Adesina, were you a part of that decision, or?
I couldn't be part of the decision because of conflict of interest, but at the same time, Adesina was not left out of consideration of the asset managers that Tara would fund just because I was on the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kudos to Tara Health.
Right. It was Tara, and we did the right thing. Like, we talked to our lawyers, we made sure that we were upholding the law, and we were also like, you know, the way this is implemented in philanthropy is really meant for a bunch of people who are already wealthy. And if what we want to do is redistribute wealth and power, we can't be those old ways. How can we not repeat painful patterns?
And that's the thing, right? When conflict of interest policies are set up, it is designed to really counteract the self-dealings that typically happen, right? The self-dealings and the harm that actually created the wealth extraction. And so to have an organization that's able to say, let's actually interrogate what is a perceived conflict of interest or what is a real conflict of interest is super important. Because when we look at the gap in income between communities of color and white wealthy communities, it's not just about wealth, right? It's about a gap in access to network, resources, skills, capacity, all the things. And so when we then tell communities, go out there, go get an education, leave your neighborhood in Oroville, we're essentially then cutting off that community in Oroville from all the skills and expertise that have been developed by telling them, then you can't go back and you can't bring something back to us. So for me, and how we try to sit with this at Katali, given that we are really explicit that we want to hire people that come from a lived and movement background in the work, we want to be able to hold, yes, what are the real and perceived conflict of interest, but what are the confluences of interest, right?
I really
what
like
does
that.
it mean? Yeah, like where are the places where, and I should give credit to that term, Gopal Dayaneni from Movement Generation taught me that term, because it should be possible that for myself, somebody who is an organizer should be able to then also resource and help move money to the organizations that I know are doing the work on the ground, right? It is quite literally your social capital that has helped you to develop and identify who are those asset fund managers that should be resourced in the ecosystem. And you and Adesina shouldn't be penalized for that.
Right.
And the truth is, this happens when it is not white men who are actually making the decisions, but when you have Black women coming into positions of leadership and wanting to move resources out into communities that people have told are not credit worthy, are not worthy of investments, all the racist stereotypical terms that are used to exclude communities from getting access to the resources they deserve and need, as a way of saying, well, it's a conflict of interest.
Right. And I've now learned that the idea that we're protecting something precious should always be interrogated, because it has been the basis for so much harm in communities of color, toward women and gender expansive folks. It should always be interrogated, because find out what's really precious, preserve and protect that, and get rid of the fake rules that just keep money where it's always been. And I think that takes a lot of courage.
Takes a lot of courage, and what you all have shown is that you can have lawyers actually look into the laws and create new policies that definitely keep everybody straight and narrow, that make sure there's no self-dealings. But we also need to update our legal systems to meet the ways that we're starting to rethink our economic systems. And so let's have that conversation rather than just saying no, because in saying no, you're actually maintaining the status quo. And we know that things actually need to change.